Happy Easter! Hey y'all, it's me, Dolores, the pastor's daughter. Get on in here. Okay, we have a listening session on today's broadcast where we will be listening to the beginning of the audiobook. And I cannot wait for you guys to hear this because we are starting to get into like the actual ins and outs of how religious narcissism, spiritual abuse, coercive control, all of the tactics that religious narcissists use against you. We are going to talk about that. But not only that, we are going to actually hear it in action. So I need you guys to get in here so you can hear this. Okay. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to go ahead and play the snippet of the audiobook just to go ahead and get us started. And then we are going to start talking about some of the really insidious and really harmful aspects of religious narcissism and spiritual abuse. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and get started.
It was all too familiar.
You know what? Fuck all y'all. Every one of you motherfuckers. Every one of you. You want to play a game with me? Come on. Let's go. Let's game up. Come on. You want to play a game? I got games for every one of you motherfuckers.
His tone sent a piercing sensation through my chest to the pit of my lower abdomen. I didn't have to see his face. The image ingrained. His eyes were squinting and black. His lips would become paper thin and tight. His face would flush with fury. His jaw would grind and pulse, and his stance would shift as if he were preparing for a physical attack. It was the voice of my father, the pastor, and it was all too familiar. He wasn't yelling. In fact, he was relatively calm. It was a cold calm that often disarmed people and weakened their defenses as his rage subtly increased. But I was completely in tune with his emotions, a skill I developed as a child, and how I survived growing up in constant fear. He gave these tantrums in doses, a toxic cocktail of verbal abuse, manipulation, and control, encapsulated by religion, which made it palatable. But anger was the active ingredient.
I want you to know I meant well to this church. I meant well to my family. Y'all don't deserve me. You won't get me another hour. You won't have me another hour. Not another second. Not one. You just lost. It'll look like you won, but you lost. Fuck you. Fuck you. You ain't trying to help me. You join the ranks of everybody. Let's play on it, Pastor. Play on it.
It was the subtleties in the way he said things, the breathy way he emphasized certain words, his vocal inflections and tone, a carefully placed grunt, a pause, or a look. Experts in narcissism call it narcissistic rage, intense anger, aggression, or passive aggression. When a narcissist experiences a setback or a disappointment, which shatters his or her illusions of grandiosity, entitlement, and superiority, and triggers inner inadequacy, shame, and vulnerability. That comes from Preston Nye in 2018. No one could instill fear like Pastor. He was so crafty that most people were oblivious to his tactics. But this time, the mask slipped. This time, the threats of violence, the literal danger, the exploitation and psychological manipulation were directed at someone more innocent than me. Someone so undeserving of the hatred, disdain, and evil that Pastor's words were laced with. They may not have risen to the level of illegality or violated a rule, but I knew my mother, the co-pastor, was in danger. Every profane word felt like a gut punch that took my breath away. I could feel the anger boiling in the pit of my belly, the exact spot where I experienced that inexplicable attack. The section of my GI tract the surgeon removed. That's where I carry my anger. Where do you carry yours? Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. Rather, bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. Ephesians 6:4, New Living Translation. The Pastor's Daughter, Provoked, available now in audio, exclusively on the Kingdom Code app at the kingdom-code.passion.io.
Wow, you guys. Wow. You know, every time I hear it, it hits me differently. It hits me differently. But here's the thing that I want to really focus on in this actual listening session, right? Because my main focus is to really point out the harmful aspects of these types of interactions, these types of toxic relationships, and highlight the fact that these relationships are happening all over. And really, and even like our friends' relationships that we see and we have no idea. In fact, we may even think that everything is just fine. But then when we actually do a little bit of digging, maybe when someone gets up the courage, right, to really speak out against the abuse that they have experienced, that's when we kind of know, like, okay, man, like this stuff is really happening like right under our noses. And then there are situations where we don't realize that it's happening to us. We know that there are things happening within our bodies, right? We feel sick, we're fatigued, we're tired all the time, we're not our best selves, we're depressed, we're stressed. Our skin is looking bad. We're not thriving. We're barely making it on our jobs. All of our other relationships are suffering. And we still are not realizing that it's this one toxic relationship. It's this one relationship that we have that is so harmful to us. But here's the thing. These relationships are hard to get out of. And the reason that they are hard is because there are tactics that spiritual abusers use, right? Tactics that spiritual abusers use to manipulate and to control you. And sometimes those tactics are based in religion. And so when you hear my story, then you will notice that there is a heavy focus on religion. And it's really difficult, to be honest with you guys, to really tell my story and not make it seem like that I'm attacking religion, but actually I am. Because like, what is religion? Like, really, what is it? But rituals and rules, regulations that are difficult for people to even adhere to. It's used today as a method of control. There is no relationship with God to be seen. Instead, what you realize is that there is a person in your life that has decided that they wanted to fill that role, that they are God. Direct your attention to the screen. This is my father, and he is a narcissistic pastor. I came to this realization by witnessing and experiencing my father's abuse. But not only that, but digging deeper into what I was seeing and what I was hearing, and not denying myself, not gaslighting myself into believing that there is no way that this man could be this way because he's my father. There's no way that this man could be this way because he's a pastor. There's no way that this man could be this way because he says he loves us. But then when you look at every other piece of evidence, right? When you are actually discerning the situation, then you see that there is nothing else that's adding up. Yeah, I hear you say that you love me, but I also am experiencing violence from you, aggression, hatred, intimidation, terrorism from you. Yet you say you love me. So in August of 2019, you guys know I left my father's church. And it was because of what you see right here on the screen. It was moments like this that were happening more and more frequently. And then when I started to do the actual research, like, let me think about this. Then I noticed that this was behavior that had been escalating. This is behavior that had been slow cooking for decades. And that at the point where I could no longer take it, it had gotten to an unbearable point. And what you see on the screen is exactly what we were seeing Sunday after Sunday, Wednesday after Wednesday. And then he called for more services and demand that we attend these services so that he could yell at us and berate us and do this type of treatment more and more, so that we were getting more and more indoctrinated, more and more beaten down. More and more beaten down as time progressed, to the point where we were barely even cognizant of what was really happening to us. What was happening to us was abuse, spiritual abuse, which involves coercion, involves intimidation, involves isolation, legalism, ensnarement, manipulation, terrorism, objectification, all of the things, 14 spiritual abuse tactics. And I think that this is happening more than we know. So there's this thing called coercive control, right? And sometimes it's a little bit better for us to hear it from another person, right? So there is a doctor called Rhoberta Shaler. And if you guys don't mind, go ahead and hit the like button as you come in, because we are really going to get into this. And notice that as we progress throughout the audiobook, that we're going to get deeper and deeper into these spiritual abuse tactics. But the book starts off with a conversation that was taking place between my mother and my father. Let's take a listen.
It was all too familiar.
You know what? Fuck all y'all. Every one of you motherfuckers. Every one of you. You want to play a game with me? Come on. Let's go. Let's game up. Come on. You want to play a game? I got games for every one of you motherfuckers.
His tone sent a piercing sensation through my chest to the pit of my lower abdomen. I didn't have to see his face. The image ingrained. His eyes were squinting and black. His lips would become paper thin and tight. His face would flush with fury. His jaw would grind and pulse, and his stance would shift as if he were preparing for a physical attack. It was the voice of my father, the pastor, and it was all too familiar. He wasn't yelling. In fact, he was relatively calm. It was a cold calm that often disarmed people and weakened their defenses as his rage subtly increased. But I was completely in tune with his emotions, a skill I developed as a child, and how I survived growing up in constant fear. He gave these tantrums in doses, a toxic cocktail of verbal abuse, manipulation, and control, encapsulated by religion, which made it palatable. But anger was the active ingredient.
I want you to know I meant well to this church. I meant well to my family. Y'all don't deserve me. You won't get me another hour. You won't have me another hour. Not another second. Not one. You just lost. It'll look like you won, but you're lost. Fuck you. Fuck you. You ain't trying to help me. You join the ranks of everybody. Let's play on the pastor. Play on.
It was the subtleties in the way he said things, the breathy way he emphasized certain words, his vocal inflections and tone, a carefully placed grunt, a pause, or a look. Experts in narcissism call it narcissistic rage, intense anger, aggression, or passive aggression. When a narcissist experiences a setback or a disappointment, which shatters his or her illusions of grandiosity, entitlement, and superiority, and triggers inner inadequacy, shame, and vulnerability. That comes from Preston Nye in 2018. No one could instill fear like Pastor. He was so crafty that most people were oblivious to his tactics. But this time, the mask slipped. This time, the threats of violence, the literal danger, the exploitation and psychological manipulation were directed at someone more innocent than me. Someone so undeserving of the hatred, disdain, and evil that Pastor's words were laced with. They may not have risen to the level of illegality or violated a rule, but I knew my mother, the co-pastor, was in danger. Every profane word felt like a gut punch that took my breath away. I could feel the anger boiling in the pit of my belly, the exact spot where I experienced that inexplicable attack. The section of my GI tract the surgeon removed. That's where I carry my anger. Where do you carry yours? Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. Rather, bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. Ephesians 6:4, New Living Translation. The Pastor's Daughter, Provoked, available now in audio, exclusively on the Kingdom Code app at the -kingdom-code.passion.io.
So I don't have permission to share with you guys the entire recording of that encounter that happened between my parents and I. And I'm going to tell you why. You guys, I got my sorry about that. I'm going to tell you why. A lot of people there are some family members who are a bit bothered by the fact that I obtained a recording of my parents. And I'm just going to like just be honest with you guys, okay? Let's just be open and honest because, for a while I have been in protection mode for my mother, because on the other end of this rage that you see displayed on the screen is a woman, a Black woman. And we are living in a time where there is a unbelievable amount of domestic violence and killings that are happening to Black women at the hands of their lovers, their spouses, their children. And that nearly became a reality for my family and my mother. That my father attempted to kill my mother. And it almost kind of pains me because it's hard that we are still in such denial about the violence that happens within our families, and even by people who we don't think would engage in that behavior, like a pastor, for instance. And so when I think about this story and I think about my mother, in fact, you guys, just this past week on April the 6th, my mother celebrated her birthday. And that day, when I talked to her, I just told her, I said, I'm just glad that you're still here. I'm glad that you are still with us. Because this man who I called my father, was trying to kill her, trying to kill my mother. And so I convinced my mother. And it took a lot to convince her. Because just like a lot of other people, she believed that recording was a violation to her marriage, to the privacy and to the intimacy, to the sanctity, to all of it, right? She believed that it was a violation. But what she had to see was that what was happening within her marriage and in her relationship was the violation. To actually capture it was not where the violation took place. The fact that she needed to capture it was the violation. That was the problem. Is that these behaviors, these actions, these words were happening to her. And she felt that she would be violating her marriage by capturing it, by recording it. But there was no feeling of violating my mother when my father said the horrible things that he said. When he told her that he'd break her. When he told her that there is nowhere that she could go, that he would kill her. And so, no, I don't have permission. In fact, the part of the book that does include the recording was actually me violating my mother and her desire for me not to share it. In all honesty, I violated her by doing that. But I felt it so important to give you guys a hint, just a little hint of what was truly happening. And trust me, it is just a little hint. The words that you heard, the fuck yous and the all you motherfuckers and all of this stuff, that came from that man right there on the screen, a whole pastor. And this is someone that we prop up in the Black community. This is someone that we support. We give our money, we give our tithe. We give our time, we give our effort, we give our prayers, we give support. Never even realizing that the people that we are actually supporting sometimes are the ones who are doing the most harm, that are doing harm at all. That was my reality, you guys. And so my mother's birthday just passed. And all I could think about was how this man tried to take her from us. Some of you don't have your parents anymore. Some of you, your parents have died, right? Prayerfully by natural causes. Hopefully it was because of their own behavior, because maybe they were eating wrong or whatever. Their heart gave out. I don't know. But I would like to think that is at least a better way to go than your other parent trying to kill your parent. And then on top of that, would say that it's God, would continue to preach and continue to claim that he is doing God's work. That is a sickness and a mental illness that has become us in our community, which really I don't even want to be a part of anymore. I don't want to be a part of the church community or the Black community, to be honest with you, because it promotes dysfunction. And I don't see how we can ever get to a place in our community, our culture, and in our families, in our churches, where we are able to stop these types of things from happening if we don't have people like me, people like my mother, who almost lost her life to capture it. So there is a thing called coercive control. It's still a relatively new concept when it comes to America, to be honest with you. In other countries, it has already become a law, right? They have already enacted this, where they are aware of the signs: financial abuse, emotional abuse, limiting your ability to isolating you from loved ones, from people who will speak out against what is happening. These are people who want to control, who want to dominate. And that's really their whole thing. There really is no other end game but to steal, kill, and destroy. So while my father is saying that he's doing God's work, if we really were to analyze, if we were to use our discernment, right, then we would see that what he is really actually doing is the devil's work. Let's listen to this brief podcast about coercive control. And you guys, I want you to go ahead and hit the link if you like. If you want to come up and join the panel, have a discussion with me, we could talk about, this issue and what I am playing for you guys, the snippet from my audiobook, as well as this snippet from a podcast by Dr. Rhoberta Shaler, where she's talking about coercive control and how this is it's still a relatively new concept here in America, but in New York, they've already started to, look into this and trying to bring it into law. So this is something that, if you guys are in the advocacy, if you're into, trying to make sure that laws get enacted to protect people, to protect the disadvantaged of our community, then, you may want to get involved in this initiative to bring coercive control to the forefront and really showing how this stuff happens. Now, in my father's case, he's doing this, like, let's say he claims to have an end game, even though his end game is really domination and control. That's really his end game, because he really does not have any intention of actually being successful at the things that he's doing, the things that he was trying to coerce my mother into doing, the things that he was trying to coerce the church into doing. He really did not have the objective to actually be successful at what he was doing. And let me just go ahead and tell you what he was doing, right? Because it's going to seem so stupid to you that my father was actually trying to buy a big church. And that's the way he calls it. It's a big church and a school. So there's this school. If you guys are familiar with the Alabama area, I live in Oxford, Anniston area, right? Alabama. And there's a city about, I guess, about 45 minutes from us, and it's called Gadsden. Gadsden, okay? And so there was this building there that spanned over 5 acres. And this building, I guess, my father saw this building as like, this is the building that is going to make people respect me. This is the building that is going to make me look good to the rest of my family members. I don't know if you guys remember, but I told you a bunch of times that my Dietrich Haddon is my first cousin, right? Dietrich Haddon, who is a famous gospel artist. His mother and my father are brother and sister. Okay. So what my father was trying to do was acquire a church, a big church and a big school, but he wants to outdo his siblings. He wants to outdo his family, right? He wants more shine, more clout, more influence, more money than the Haddons. I mean, let's just keep it, 100, because that's what it is. It sounds really stupid. Like, at least it does to me. Like, really? Like, really, is your greed and your pride that's driving you to do these horrible things? But yeah, it is. My father wants the praise. He wants the glory. He wants the shine. He wants to be admired. He wants to be celebrated and adored. He wants people to worship him. Let's start this stream, and I'm going to pull up a picture, okay? I'm going to pull up the footage from the building so I can show you guys what the building looks like, okay? So let's listen to a bit of this snippet from Dr. Shaler. She is going to tell us about coercive control. And sometimes it's really good, like I was saying earlier, to hear it from someone else, right? This is a doctor, so she, has experience in this. She has been working in this field for a very long time. And one thing that I really noticed is that there is a lot of really good information out there about these different tactics, right? But the one thing that I really bring to you guys that is different from any other channel, any other content creator, any other therapist in this field is that I have actual real life evidence of what I'm saying, right? This is a real life case study of what is happening behind closed doors. And I was able to capture that by recording, which is what I eventually convinced my mother to do. I told her, I was like, look, you don't have to give this recording to anyone. You don't have to share it. Just capture it for yourself so you know what is happening to you. And that's one thing that I wish I could really push to you guys, especially those who are being abused, those of you who are in relationships where there is a lot of emotional abuse that is taking place, gaslighting and all those different things. I want you guys to really consider recording it, okay? Now, think about this, though. If you get to the point where you feel like you need to record it, then maybe it's best for you to just go ahead and move on. So consider that first. Consider just go ahead and just getting out of it. But sometimes you will find yourself looping back to these relationships. If you don't capture what they're doing to you, then you will forget that those things were done to you. You will be more susceptible to that person coming back and saying, hey, that really wasn't what happened. And then they start to gaslight you and make you doubt what you experienced. And so that's why it's really important for you to record it and keep all the evidence, all the receipts, everything that you possibly can. But again, if you find yourself in these types of relationships, you really should just go ahead and get out if you can. As soon as it's safe to do it, get you a support system and get you a plan in place and keep it quiet. Don't tell these people that you are trying to get out of it, because they will kill you. They absolutely will kill you. And then they'll be right back behind the pulpit like my father was, acting like nothing happened. Let's take a listen to this.
Laws only maintain that domestic violence has to do with physical harm, but much more pervasive than physical harm is the topic I'm bringing to you today, which is the whole understanding of coercive control, the sneaky, subtle, sadistic patterns of domination that happen in an emotionally abusive relationship. You need to know these things. You need to recognize them. You need to call them when you see them, and you need to know when to move away from them. So today you're going to have a full understanding of what coercive control looks like, sounds like, feels like, and you will know whether or not that's what's happening in your relationship. Stay tuned. Welcome to Save Your Sanity, help for handling hijackals, those difficult, toxic, and often disturbing people in your life. I'm Dr. Rhoberta Shaler, the Relationship Help Doctor, and I'm here for you. You'll get the insight, skills, strategies, and support to stop tolerating verbal.
Now, I highly recommend that you guys go and subscribe to her channel and listen to this really great information that she has. And then her delivery, I love her delivery. I love how she delivers it in such a kind and caring way. You could tell that she is really compassionate. Even when you guys are listening to things about narcissism and stuff like that, you really have to be careful who you are listening to. Okay. Now, I know people have always, that whole a broke clock is right twice a day thing and all that stuff, right? But also consider really guarding your ear gate, right? Really guarding who you listen to, because you have to be aware that in this day and age, right, there is a lot of deception going on. So while a person is giving you maybe some really good information about narcissism and about different things, right, they could also be slipping in some very harmful things in the midst of all the good information that they are telling you. And because a lot of us are really lacking in our discernment, right? We really have not exercised that muscle. We don't really know how to discern truth from lies and stuff like that. It's really important that we just go ahead and cut it off until we can really increase our discernment and learn how to decipher what's good, the meat from the bones, basically, right? So you have to be able to decipher what's really good information for you to hold on to and keep, and what needs to be discarded, what could be harmful to you. Okay. So I really want you to consider who you are listening to. Obviously, I recommend her. I've listened to several of her videos over the years, and I haven't heard anything, that leads me to believe that there is anything harmful coming from her. That she delivers things in a very caring way, which is what a lot of us need who have been abused, especially when we have suffered from emotional abuse. It's really hard for us to take information from some people because of their delivery and because of what we have been, what we've been exposed to, as far as like really breaking us down emotionally. Okay. So just remember that as you are listening to people, there's this, never mind, I won't get into that, but just be careful. Okay, you guys, let's continue.
It's happening now, or it happened to you in the past, maybe by a parent, partner, ex, relative, or even a coworker. Time to take life back, to recover
yes, I'm
and
back
to
on
rediscover
here,
you, your values, dreams, desires, and realize them in healthy ways in healthy relationships. I'm so glad you're here.
Jump up on the stream, honey. I hit the link. I put it in the comments. I put the link in the comments. You guys are welcome to go ahead and hit the stream. Obviously, if my father or, one of them is listening, please do not hit my link. Okay? Do not hit my link, as you will be disappointed. You will be embarrassed. Okay? Do not hit my link. This is for people. These are for discerning people. These are for people who don't abuse. And these are for people who can have a really good conversation and not play games. Okay? So if you are on some games, please do not hit my link. And if you know who you are, if I don't want you on here, do not hit my link. But everybody else can hit my link though. Okay. Let's continue.
Of control. Many people haven't. And of course, you're not going to hear about it unless you are looking for understanding of what's actually going on in your relationship. It might have gone on in a relationship that you were raised in. Maybe a parent was the one who perpetrated coercive control over you. Of course, most teenagers think that that's the case no matter what, but I mean the real deal, the real coercive control. And I want to really bring some insights into that for you, because I've called this episode Coercive Control, Sneaky, Subtle, and Sadistic of Domination. And I did it for a purpose, because the word sadistic is important in this. In the Oxford Dictionary, sadistic is defined as deriving pleasure from inflicting pain, suffering, or humiliation on another person.
Do y'all hear that? Do you hear that? You need to know, you need to understand, right? That there are people who really just enjoy doing this type of stuff. And I know if you're not that type of person, it's really hard for you to grasp how someone could really get pleasure from your pain. But there are people who get pleasure from your pain, okay? Those are very sadistic people. That's what she's talking about right now, okay?
So a hijackal, one of those relentlessly difficult, toxic people that I talk about so much, is a person.
One more thing, you guys, is she calls them hijackals, but these are people that you would say they're very toxic, narcissistic, right? Antisocial, as in the actual meaning of it, not the like the layman's terms of someone who's just like likes to keep to themselves, but no, someone who actually is antisocial, as in the mental health disorder. Okay. And also, if you're looking at it on the religious side of it, these are people, these are demonic spirits, basically, right? So that's what she calls them, hijackals. Because first of all, I believe that she wants to get away from calling it narcissist, because people are really still confused about whether narcissism is like, if you're saying someone is a narcissist, are you diagnosing them or not? And no, you're not diagnosing them, which is why I feel fine calling my father a narcissist, right? Even though I'm a mental health professional, I am not diagnosing my father, because calling someone a narcissist is not a diagnosis. Okay? It's not a diagnosis. So stop feeling like that. Go ahead and call a thing a thing. And stop feeling like you are judging or that you are putting labels on people. No, you need to call a thing, okay? If you are getting to the point where you don't want to recognize what you see, what you know, you feel, what all the evidence is pointing to this, then you are really causing yourself some mental illness there. That's a dissonance. That's a problem. You have to be able to call a thing a thing. The first part of this process is identifying what it is, admitting that this is what it is. Okay, let's continue.
Who derives pleasure from inflicting pain and suffering and humiliation on others. And I would add another thing to the pain and suffering and humiliation. I would add the joy that they find in intimidation. And again, I looked in the Oxford Dictionary to find out exactly what intimidation means. And it means frighten, especially in order to make a person do what one wants. Now, doesn't that just sound like a hijackal? Mm-hmm. They want to intimidate you. They want to humiliate you. They enjoy the fact that you are suffering. And I know that some hijackals say that they don't enjoy it, but if they didn't enjoy it, they would stop doing it. And you know from my last episode on whether or not hijackals are doing what they do on purpose, that it is not the case that they cannot control this urge. After all, go and listen to that episode. But they don't do it everywhere, do they? They don't do it with every person. So therefore, they do have control. They do make decisions.
Exactly.
They do decide when to be their nasty selves and when to be their charming, manipulative selves.
Exactly. Another thing that you guys need to know, right, is that you are unable, like a lot of people were unable to see the behaviors that my father was exhibiting. Why? Because he's able to turn it on and off. He knows who to do it in front of, and he knows who not to do it in front of. that means he's very much aware of what he is doing because he can turn it on and off. Right? And just as she said, if he didn't enjoy the sadistic behavior that he was engaging in, he simply would not do it. But he enjoys it. Let's continue.
And so that's important to know. So coercive control, this is a term that was coined by a man called Evan Stark, and he wrote a book about it. And I got really interested in a paper that he wrote. And for those of you who like to look things up, it's called Representing Battered Women, Coercive Control and the Defense of Liberty. And so I started.
Okay, did y'all hear that? Representing battered women, coercive control, and the something of liberty. I didn't catch all of it.
It's called Representing Battered Women, Coercive Control and the Defense of Liberty. And so I started going down that path to see what he meant about entrapment and how it would help me help you understand what's going on. So he defines coercive control this way: an ongoing pattern of domination by which male, and it is gendered, by which male abusive partners primarily interweave repeated physical and sexual violence with intimidation, sexual degradation, isolation, and control. I'm going to read that again because that's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
It is defined as an ongoing pattern of domination by which male abusive partners primarily interweave repeated physical and sexual violence with intimidation, sexual degradation, isolation, and control. The primary outcome, he says, of coercive control is a condition of entrapment that can be hostage-like in the harms it inflicts on dignity, liberty, autonomy, and personhood, as well as to the physical and psychological integrity. Wow.
Oh my God.
Does that feel familiar to you?
Y'all, do y'all hear that? Oh my gosh. Let's just go back. Okay, let's go back a little bit because we need to catch it.
Condition of entrapment that can be degradation by which male abusive partners.
And that's another thing that we, that we have to admit, right? That this is behavior that is predominantly done by men. This is behavior that is predominantly done by men. And it also involves sexual abuse. Let's keep listening.
And control. I'm going to read that again because that's a lot. It is defined as an ongoing pattern of domination by which male abusive partners primarily interweave repeated physical and sexual violence with intimidation, sexual degradation, isolation, and control. The primary outcome, he says, of coercive control is a condition of entrapment that can be hostage-like in the harms it inflicts on dignity, liberty, autonomy, and personhood, as well as to the physical and psychological integrity. Wow. Does that feel familiar to you?
Now, see, this is the component of it that we are going to be building on, right? Is the spiritual aspect. Because this type of behavior is the makings of a cult, you guys. And I am convinced, 100% convinced, that my father was well on his way to creating a cult environment within our church. Did y'all hear me? The man that you see right there on that screen. And the only reason that he was not able to do what he really wanted to do is because he had discerners. in his congregation? Me. And I wasn't going. My husband wasn't going. My children wasn't going. We weren't buying it. We were like, and even though we didn't know what was truly happening, we knew that it wasn't right. We knew that it didn't sit well in our spirit. And we knew that this behavior, if left unchecked, if there is no one speaking truth to power, right? If there is no one saying, look, you are doing the wrong thing here. No one's willing to step to my father and tell the truth. And then when that truth isn't heard or respected or listened to, then leave. That's what we had to do. And it sounds super easy, though, the way I'm saying it, but it wasn't easy at all. It wasn't easy at all. And a lot happened since then. When you sever ties with a spiritual abuser, it's like a piece of your soul is leaving too. Because that's where they try to penetrate. They want to reach you on a soul level. They want to affect who you are, who you were purposed to be. It's very satanic. But this is what was happening. Let's continue.
That something is happening to you that really gets in the way of you feeling like your dignity is a priority, your liberty is a priority, your autonomy is a priority, and who you are. You know, I say so many times that any relationship, in order to be healthy, has to have 3 hallmarks. There has to be equality, reciprocity, and mutuality. Now, you're sure not going to find those things in a relationship with a hijackal.
Absolutely
I'm sure you're clear about that after listening to a bunch of episodes. And if you're new to Save Your Sanity podcast, I'm so glad you found me and this podcast, and I invite you to go back and listen to the many, many, many episodes in this series. So, yes, it's true. Women also assault their partners, but coercive control in Evan Stark's mind and in his construction of the idea, he says it's gendered because it's used to secure male privilege and its regime of domination, subordination. It's constructed around the enforcement of gender stereotypes.
Wow.
So that really has a lot to say about many things that happen when we see men in control of things, and they are doing these things that we talk about, that they are deriving pleasure from inflicting pain, suffering, humiliation, intimidation, anything to coerce you, anything to have control over you. Now, you know, many times there's physical violence in relationships, and we're very, very aware of that. But sometimes people don't recognize the physical violence as the tip of the iceberg for what's been going on for a long time that may or may not have been reported and may or may not have been the buildup to.
Notice what she's saying, okay, you guys, that there is a buildup. No one just starts out on 100, right? So even though you see what I'm showing you on the screen is, you know, is that kind of like that tip of the iceberg, right? Just note, right, that there was a buildup. There was the love bombing that happened. There was all the putting you on a pedestal and really just building you up, and I need you, and you're valuable to me, and it's all of that stuff. It happens in a way that really, like, it grabs you, you guys. If a person just all of a sudden out the gate just started doing what you see on the screen here, just yelling at you and just being crazy, then it's going to immediately turn you off. So no, they have to endear you first. They have to love on you first. They have to you know, weaken your defenses first. Be real kind and real sweet first. Maybe buy you something. Maybe do something really nice for you. Pray for you even. And then it gets more and more intense. You started noticing more and more issues. But what you usually hold on to is how it was in the beginning. In the beginning, it wasn't like that. In the beginning, he was just so lovable. In the beginning, he was just my favorite person. And then you realize that, wow, like, this is nothing like it was in the beginning. This is a madman. I don't even recognize this person. Let's continue.
This amazing physical assault. And, there was a report done in 2006 in Britain, and they looked at 500 women who had been assaulted in various forms and involved in extreme violence. And the statistics were that 70% had been choked or strangled at least once. Wow. 60% had been beaten in their sleep. 24% had been cut or stabbed at least once.
Cut or stabbed.
And almost 60% had been forced to have sex against their will.
Wow.
26.5% had been beaten unconscious.
Oh my
and
God.
10% had been tied up.
Oh my God.
And as a result of the assaults, 38% of the women reported suffering permanent damage.
Now, you guys have already heard me. If you guys have been following my story, then you know. I've been telling you guys about the tie-up stories, about the little different torture things. Like, I've been telling you guys about this stuff. This is exactly what's been happening. But my situation actually gives you guys a fly on the wall experience, right? It gives you a vantage point where you can actually see what Dr. Shaler is saying right now. All of these behaviors, I can show you evidence of them, so that you know how this stuff happens over time, how insidious it really is, how damaging it really is, and how this stuff happens right under your noses. It's happening right next door. If you went to church today, then I need you to know that there are women that were in your congregation that are being coercively controlled. There are women in your congregation that have experienced some of these same statistics that she said, being beaten in their sleep, being beaten unconscious, sexually assaulted. And these are by people that claim to love them, that they sleep next to, that they may call father, that they even may call son or brother. There is something happening within our community and in these churches that we must talk about. Let's continue.
But you don't want to be in these statistics. Yes, sure, you could say that's 2006. I would say it's more frequent today.
It is. It is more frequent today. In fact, the Black femicide rate, you guys, there is a Black woman dying like less than every 5.5 hours at the hands of an intimate partner or family member, close friend. They're being killed by a person that looks just like them. And even though we like to turn our attention to every other issue that we have in our society, the fact of the matter is that sometimes the people who are more dangerous to you are right there in your own home. Let's continue.
That is a problem, because the vast majority of assaults used coercive control. And that was over time. That was something that happened over and over and over.
Yes.
And so it was marked by the frequency and duration of it, not by the severity of it. And It was reported in 2008 by a study that men using coercive control assaulted women 6 times more often on average than men who used physical violence alone. So this is incredible stuff. And it is this intimidation that's used to keep abuse secret. And the idea is to instill at home, in the privacy of home, to instill fear and dependence and compliance and loyalty. And oh yes, over and over and over, to instill shame.
Yeah.
And when that's all happening, a woman, because remember, we're talking about coercive control as being something that men do, because it is, in Stark's definition, something that men do, although women are capable of it. It undermines the will to resist. After a while, the woman is so diminished, so demeaned, so devalued, that eventually she just gives up. And she loses her will to resist. And then you just become a doormat. First of all, you've bent yourself into a pretzel, but then when you really give up, you just become a doormat. And I have worked with women who have gotten to that place in their lives, and they've had sort of a one last thing, and they came and they asked me, what can I do? Is there anything I can do? Am I wrong? By this time, they were believing it was their fault because they've been told so often it was their fault. And I was so glad that they reached out. And you can also reach out at any time.
I'm going to stop the recording there, because that's the point. That's what I want you guys to hear as it relates to this part of the audiobook that we are listening to, right? We've already listened to it twice. I'm going to play it again, because now that you have some context of what you are listening to, then you're able to put it in perspective that when she's talking about women who have experienced this coercive control, and it has been going on for years and years and years, decades, right? Then eventually what you end up seeing is really a shell of a woman. Someone that is so beaten down that she doesn't even really care if she lives or dies anymore. That her health is severely compromised. That she doesn't even look like herself. Her weight is out of control. Her skin looks terrible. Her hair is falling out. She's getting sicker and sicker, less able to move about physically. Where she doesn't even put up a fight anymore. It's just like whatever. Because they become so beaten down. That was my mother, you guys. And even after doing all that to her, he was still gonna kill her. He was still gonna kill her. Even after doing all that to my mother, and my father was still gonna kill her. And that's how severe this stuff gets. That is why it's important for us to use our discernment. Because even your discernment, you using your discernment can help to save another woman's life. Just like it did in my own family. Just like how it saved my mother. And these things were happening behind closed doors, but they were also happening in the church. And that's what I was able to capture. I was able to capture what was happening in the church and what my father was doing to me. But then my mother, I could see that she was just, y'all, my mother was looking bad. She was looking bad. And I could tell like that if he didn't actually kill her, then she was just going to die from the stuff that he was doing to her. Like if he didn't just directly just go ahead and just take her out, that she was being taken out slowly anyway. Because my father was beating her down. That's what coercive control does. So when you hear this snippet from the beginning of my book and how I started the book, and each book in the series is going to uncover more and more of this plot to kill my mother. And it's just how I had to uncover it. It was stuff that was revealed to me over time in the different recordings that I had. When I would go back and listen to them, then I started hearing things that my father was saying that I didn't hear before. That yes, this man had a plan. He had a plan, y'all. And I was getting in the way of it because I was against him doing what he wanted to do, and I wasn't going to support it, and I was leaving. So he called me. He called me and he tried to use those very same tactics on me. Except I wasn't in the house with him. I don't sleep with him. I have my own husband. I already have a man that I'm submitted to, that I listen to, that I honor and respect, that protects and provides for me. But in the beginning, my father fully thought that he would be able to use these same tactics on my husband and be able to control what my husband was doing. He'd done it in other people's lives, in other people's families in the church, causing breakups and everything else because of his division. And so when we listen to this snippet of the recording again, I want you guys to listen now with a different ear, right? Listen and discern the different tactics of coercion that you hear that are taking place in this private recording. And then I want you to hear what I said and how I was able to discern these patterns within my father. And it was those two factors coming together and using facts, observations, and experiences, using intuition and the Holy Spirit to make a decision to leave this very harmful, toxic situation that my mother almost died in. Let's take a listen.
It was all too familiar.
You know what? Fuck all y'all. Every one of you motherfuckers. Every one of you. You want to play a game with me? Come on. Let's go. Let's game up. Come on. You want to play a game? I got games for every one of you motherfuckers.
His tone sent a piercing sensation through my chest to the pit of my lower abdomen. I didn't have to see his face. The image ingrained. His eyes were squinting and black. His lips would become paper thin and tight. His face would flush with fury. His jaw would grind and pulse, and his stance would shift as if he were preparing for a physical attack. It was the voice of my father, the pastor, and it was all too familiar. He wasn't yelling. In fact, he was relatively calm. It was a cold calm that often disarmed people and weakened their defenses as his rage subtly increased. But I was completely in tune with his emotions, a skill I developed as a child, and how I survived growing up in constant fear. He gave these tantrums in doses, a toxic cocktail of verbal abuse, manipulation, and control, encapsulated by religion, which made it palatable. But anger was the active ingredient.
I want you to know I meant well to this church. I meant well to my family. Y'all don't deserve me. You won't get me another hour. You won't have me another hour. Not another second. Not one. You just lost. It'll look like you won, but you're lost. Fuck you. Fuck you. trying to help me. You join the ranks of everybody. Let's play on it, Pastor. Play on it.
It was the subtleties in the way he said things, the breathy way he emphasized certain words, his vocal inflections and tone, a carefully placed grunt, a pause, or a look. Experts in narcissism call it narcissistic rage, intense anger, aggression, or passive aggression. When a narcissist experiences a setback or a disappointment, which shatters his or her illusions of grandiosity, entitlement, and superiority, and triggers inner inadequacy, shame, and vulnerability. That comes from Preston Nye in 2018. No one could instill fear like Pastor. He was so crafty that most people were oblivious to his tactics. But this time, the mask slipped. This time, the threats of violence, the literal danger, the exploitation and psychological manipulation were directed at someone more innocent than me. Someone so undeserving of the hatred, disdain, and evil that Pastor's words were laced with. They may not have risen to the level of illegality or violated a rule, but I knew my mother, the co-pastor, was in danger. Every profane word felt like a gut punch that took my breath away. I could feel the anger boiling in the pit of my belly, the exact spot where I experienced that inexplicable attack. The section of my GI tract the surgeon removed. That's where I carry my anger. Where do you carry yours? Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. Rather, bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. Ephesians 6:4, New Living Translation. The Pastor's Daughter, Provoked, available now in audio, exclusively on the Kingdom Code app at the -kingdom-code.passion.io.
And there we have it. The harmful effects of coercive control and how it could be so subtle. So subtle that you don't even realize that it's happening to you. And before you know it, you're not even yourself anymore. So I'm going to let you guys go. But if you are just tuning in and you need to go back and listen to this video and really kind of get an understanding of how coercive control can happen and how the thing is really happening right under our noses, right? In our families, in our communities, in our churches. And, we really don't realize it, but they are extremely harmful. And it's something that we really need to raise awareness of. And so you guys, you know that my audiobook is available now. So I want you to go ahead and grab it. Go ahead and listen to it. It's available exclusively on my app. The app is entitled The Kingdom Code. Okay. And so we're going to even talk about that because you know how in our community, we always talk about code and being on code, right? But see, the Kingdom Code stands for a community of discerners everywhere, community of discerners. And that's the only code we need to be on, y'all. That's the only code because if we are using our discernment in every decision in every area of our lives, then we can trust that we are making the best decisions for ourselves, those around us, in our world in general, right? We can be sure that we are making the best decision for ourselves, for those around us, and for our world. And I would submit to you that that is a skill that is extremely lacking. And no, you don't have to be on this high spiritual journey, be super religious to have discernment. Okay? But we're going to talk about all of that. We're going to get right into the nitty gritty of what discernment is and how we can use discernment to really protect ourselves from these harmful situations and these toxic relationships. Okay. So you guys go ahead and grab my book. It is available now right there on my app. If you are not ready to purchase the book yet, let's just say you want to just get a sample, a few episodes, then go ahead and get you a basic membership. It is a free membership. It gives you some really good information about discernment, about spiritual abuse. Also, you get a couple of free episodes of my audiobook that's really going to let you know what it's all about. And I'm sure after that, you're going to want to go ahead and get the audiobook. Okay. But in the meantime, just go ahead and sign up on my app. That gives me good contact information for you so that, we are steady building this community. And it lets me know that you are with me, right? That you are in support of this mission to really help people to increase their discernment, to really raise awareness about spiritual abuse, about the harmful effects of religious narcissism, coercive control, and all of those things that are happening to us that is really contributing to us being sick, right? I believe that 90% of our illnesses stem from or exacerbated by toxic relationships. And that was a reality for me. And my story is really going to come alive for you as you listen to it. So go ahead and grab the audiobook and let me know, honey, when you do. Okay. I love you guys. And let me just close you out with a little snippet as we head out. And again, go ahead and like and share the video. Thank you so much.
I am a nationally certified counselor. However, I am not telling my story from a clinical perspective. Further, I am not trying to diagnose anyone discussed in this book. My clinical training has been a powerful tool in understanding my life as the daughter of a narcissistic pastor and working through the healing process. I tell my story as a daughter, a believer, and a victor. I tell my story as someone recovering from narcissistic abuse and learning to love herself. I don't have all the answers, but honestly, I'm not sure the answers are what's needed right now. Instead, I'll focus on putting it all on paper. I must warn you, this book contains transcriptions of my father's own words, offensive language, and recounts of abuse that some readers may find triggering. I encourage you to take breaks, practice calming breathing techniques, and continue reading as tolerated. Further, I encourage sufferers of abuse and neglect to contact law enforcement and seek help from medical and mental health professionals. So take a break. Take a breath. Take it in small chunks, but don't silence me. Hear my voice, feel my heart, and take a journey through my mind as I process this complex childhood trauma. Predictably, things will worsen before they get better. But my father's prayers for ill will to come to me and my family will not deter me. As the pastor's daughter, I offer a unique perspective, a vantage point different from others. I have witnessed pure evil, the inner workings of a man whose only God was himself and his money. I cannot move forward in my journey until I confront and expose the abuse, manipulation, and control that were making me sick. But where do I start? At the beginning, the root of the anger, the events and actions that cause my heart to break, my spirit to ache, and my soul to cry out. I pray my experiences enlighten and encourage all who read this book, and that God gives you the strength to do what is necessary to heal from narcissistic abuse. I believe that there are lessons in these challenging situations, that even negative things ultimately work out for our benefit. Just as I am doing the work to heal from the abuse I experienced, my father can too. This will anger him, but he too can find redemption from what I reveal within these pages. The choice is his, but I must expose this now so we can heal. As Dr. Ramani says, sometimes hurt people, help people. So I invite you to take this journey with me, the journey of a truth teller. My name is Dolores, and I am the daughter of a narcissistic pastor. That's my reality, and this is my story. The Pastor's Daughter, Provoked, available now on audio, including exclusive audio recordings. Listen now on the Kingdom Code app, thekingdomcode.passion.e